Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Sally Cookson is a renowned director whose work creating spectacular and richly theatrical adaptations of classics such as Jane Eyre, La Strada and Peter Pan has won glowing plaudits. Her career has taken her to the West End, the National Theatre in London and major producing houses across the country. I'm with Sally at the West Yorkshire Playhouse to talk about her latest project, a brand new adaptation of children's classic The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, due to be staged throughout December and January at the West Yorkshire Playhouse's main stage Quarry Theatre as their major Christmas show. Sally, thank you so much for taking time out of rehearsals to join us at British Theatre Guide.
You're very welcome.
First of all, could you just tell us a bit about the background to this particular project? How did Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe go
Yes. Well, it was while I was working on Jane Eyre at the National, Chris Harper, who used to be producer at NTP there, invited me to lunch and said that he wanted to do a Christmas show with me and that he was setting up a new company and would I be interested in looking at The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And I knew the book. I'd read it as a child. I'd seen all the BBC, television serials, and I'd read it to my daughter when she was little. So I was very familiar with the material, but I wasn't initially convinced that I was the right person to turn it into a piece of theatre. But I said, well, I'll read it. I'll take it home and I'll read it over Christmas, which is what I did. And I read it in one hit, and I'd forgotten actually what an important and beautiful story it is and how it has inspired so many brilliant writers. That idea of a portal going into a magical world, going into a wardrobe and coming out into another land is the thing of fairy tale and sparks your imagination. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. I just couldn't stop thinking about how are we going to do the wardrobe? I really want to have a crack at that. It just made me tingle, the idea of trying to kind of approach that theatrically. So it got I had the sort of itch. I wanted to scratch the itch, and that was what started me off. And we then did a 2-week workshop, where we explored all sorts of ideas, because there are lots of challenges that this story offers up. So we investigated how to create this Narnian world in the round, because when Chris and I came up and looked at the West Yorkshire Playhouse, the Quarry Theatre, we were discussing it and didn't realise that it had the potential to be turned into the round. It had never been done before, and that felt challenging but also very exciting. So we both thought, well, why don't we do that? And in the round at Christmas is particularly enjoyable because I love Christmas audiences, because they're made up of all ages, and often people who've never been to the theatre before. It's their first trip to the theatre. For young people it's their first experience. So being in the round is a very inclusive way of watching and experiencing something. So it feels entirely right to offer it up at Christmas in the round.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the challenge of not knowing how to do something is really important to you. Those two things, how do we do the wardrobe? How do we do this in the round? It's never been done in the Quarry Theatre.
I go into rehearsals not knowing most of the. I don't have the answers. I have a few ideas. But often the ideas that I think are going to work are thrown out in the first couple of weeks. And that is, it's terrifying devising. It's absolutely, nail-biting territory. And you've got me at, where are we? Week 5. So we're absolutely in the darkest place. And there are lots of unanswered questions, but it's thrilling, because as soon as you get a talented group of creatives in a room together, you offer up a challenge to them. How are we going to do this? And you get 15 brilliant ideas.
And so is your role, how do you manage that sort of fusion of all, because there's all sorts of different people in the room working on this. I know there's sort of acrobatics, and there are musicians,
Yes. Well, you have to be quite kind of clear about everyone's roles. I mean, I have a very close relationship with all of the creatives, and we know what our roles are. And I work very closely with Adam Peck, who's the writer in the room. So we came up with a kind of basic structure. So we have got a kind of loose scene structure in place, which saves a lot of time. So I'm not working out with the actors, which character's in, which character's out. We kind of know what needs to happen in each scene, which saves a lot of time. But things like, one of the things I wanted to make sure we did was find a way of creating, for instance, the Narnian landscape that wasn't a set that kind of trundled in and did the job for us. I wanted the actors, the ensemble, to create the Winterland from things that the audience could see they were kind of using, and that was a great kind of exploration of shared ideas. And I work very closely with Ray on that, and Ray is a fantastic collaborator because she'll come into the rehearsal room. Ray Smith is the designer, and with the costumes, for instance, we spent a couple of days in the rehearsal room where she brought in racks and racks and racks and racks of costumes and dressing up clothes, and we had 2 days of dressing up where we'd spent a week kind of exploring the characters and deciding what the world was going to look like, and then we asked the actors to dress up and choose things that they liked, and Ray would find things, so that the costume has a sense of devising as well, and has been really informed by how the actors see their characters as well. And that's been a really playful element that's been. It has informed, how we make the work, really.
And so how long is this process in all? You say we're in week 5 now.
We've got 7 weeks, which sounds like a long time, but it's really not when we don't have a proper script to begin with. So we're just at the stage now where we've made the first half. We've got a script for the first half. But that will all change. But we have got words on pages, which feels quite comforting. But it's an intense process and takes a long time, because you do listen to a lot of the voices in the room, and there has to be a point during that process where I have to say, right, that's enough ideas. This is what we're going to do. We're going to lock it down to this. And that's important, because I think if the actors felt there was no one in the room, really making those key decisions, it's quite hard to forge through ideas after ideas. So I do have that kind of final decision-making voice in the room.
Yes, yeah. How has that evolved for you as a kind of process of devising and directing? And how is your role in the room? How do you define it, really?
I suppose I'm a facilitator of creativity, but I also instigate ideas and offer up ideas, and I do have very strong kind of ideas about what works. I know what works and what doesn't. So as soon as we put everything together, I'm the one who will sort of cut it up and change it and squidge it all into the right shape. So I'll kind of mould it and shape it.
And you're taking on something again which is both a very well-loved book, but also possibly better known as a BBC TV series, as you mentioned, and more recent films as well. I mean, I remember the BBC versions, and you've clearly worked in that way a number of times, recently particularly. How do you how does that affect your process?
Well, it's those versions are there hanging over you, but you have to leave them outside the room. Once you make the decision to adapt a book, you have to dive into it and discover it for yourself, and not allow the successes of other adaptations to kind of infiltrate your own decision making. So I didn't watch the film. I did see it years ago when my children were younger, and I watched the BBC series when I was a kid, but I haven't as in my research looked at those. That's not a kind of useful way of going about it. But I feel the weight of the title enormously, because many people cite it as a very influential book in their lives, and they have very strong ideas about what they want to see on stage. So I'm mindful of that. I'm also, really keen to make it a theatrical experience for the audience. I want audiences to enjoy the theatrical element of it. So we won't be presenting everything on stage for them. We will be encouraging the audiences to use their imagination and come on the journey of telling this story, so that they become involved in the story in a very theatrical way. And I think being in the round forces us to do that, because you can't have loads of stuff to bring on stage, otherwise you wouldn't see all the pictures. So you have to have an imaginative way, which is how I love to make theatre. Music and movement are very important key elements.
Yes, there was a review of Jane Eyre which really stuck out for me. I think it was Susanna Clapp referred to, she asked the question, is this what it would be like reading a book with synesthesia? This kind of every element is kind of combining and almost sort of confusing.
Yes, well, I don't like it when the sort of different elements stick out. I like the movement and the music all to work together so that everything feels cohesive, and you can't sort of see where one department works and the other. We all work together at the same time, and every department is as important as the other. So sometimes it will be entirely right that music takes the lead in telling the story. Other times it will be that movement, where that is what is going to help us tell the particular kind of moment in the story that makes the most impact. Other times spoken word is necessary. So it's not having this is a choreographed bit, this is a dance section, this is a song. It doesn't work like that for me.
I know you're quite short of time, because obviously being at this stage of rehearsals you need to head off, but just before you go, if I could ask you a couple more questions. One being what you're finding emerging from your rehearsal room experiments at this stage, what you're really excited about kind of sharing, even if that may be provisional and maybe sort of changing as we speak. Are there kind of messages or sorts of moments which are kind of...
Well, all sorts of things are exciting me. I mean, one of the kind of simplest aspects of this story that I love, especially at Christmas, is that it's the simple story of good overcoming bad. And the best fairy tales are made up on that premise. And we're really kind of looking at that in terms of the seasons as well, and that the light comes into Narnia, the sun comes into Narnia, and the summer gets restored. And we're enjoying that very much indeed through the music, through the movement, through the design, where the natural world is a big part of our interpretation. I'm really enjoying how we're creating the White Witch and her entourage. She has a sleigh, which is a really important part of who she is. She thunders around Narnia in this massive sleigh, and one of the things I was really anxious about was not having a great big piece of set, rolled in and rolled out. We've found a lovely way of creating her sleigh, which allows her to appear magically and disappear magically. So that's been great. And also going through the wardrobe. Our version of going through the wardrobe is I think imaginative and allows the audience to feel as though they're going through a special portal into another world.
So you've cracked it then?
Nearly. I wouldn't say I've cracked it. No, I never say that. But we're getting there.
Okay. Well, I think that's a lovely point to leave it on. Sally Cookson, thanks so much for talking to British Theatre Guide. And just to say, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe opens at West Yorkshire Playhouse's Quarry Theatre on the 29th of November and runs until the 21st of January. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.